Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. Good afternoon. Let me welcome you to this CLIAR AQuA All Questions Answered event. It's co-organized by CLIAR and the ICT48 project, Visions, TAILOR and AI4Media. This time we focus on the topic of ChatGPT and large language models. It's a topic which is currently highly debated on many levels, and that you may have some questions about. And that is why we're here today, to provide an opportunity for your, and a platform for your questions, which will be answered by our panelists. I am Morten Irgens. I'm a member of the CLIAR Board of Directors, a member of the Board of ADRA, which is the AI Data and Robotics Association, and NORA, which is the Norwegian Research Consortium in Artificial Intelligence, and I'm a Vice Rector here at Kristiania. I am joined here by four other panelists: Fredrik Heintz, Tomas Mikolov, Ioannis Pitas, and Ariel Ekgren. Please, could you briefly introduce yourself, name and affiliation, and be short. So Fredrik, I'll start with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fredrik Heintz. I'm a professor of computer science at Linköping University, where I lead the Reasoning and Learning Lab. I'm also the coordinator of the TAILOR network and a board member of ADRA. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. Ariel, please.
My name is Ariel Ekgren, and I'm a researcher at the Natural Language Understanding Lab at AI Sweden, and where I'm part of leading the technical work with training large language models for the Nordic region.
Thank you, Ariel. And Tomas?
Hello, I'm a researcher at the Czech Technical University in Prague, and otherwise my background is actually mostly in neural language modeling, which is what I've been working on for quite a few years. And I did open source many of the ideas started in 2010, so people can still find it as this ARN and LLM toolkit.
Thank you, Tomas. And Ioannis?
Nikki, and on artificial intelligence, and I am also chair of the International AI Doctoral Academy on AI.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. And this session is aimed at being interactive with you, our audience. So please join the discussion and post your questions directly into the Q&A panel in Zoom or in the live chat on YouTube. We will be monitoring that and fielding questions to the panelists. So we will try to keep the format very swift and have no more than a minute per answer or something like that. So now we can go to our first question. And the first question we're having is, we're starting with models and such. I can see large language models and GPT. What are large language models? How do they work? What is a generative model? And what are the letters GPT stand for? Tomas, would you mind trying yourself out on that question, please?
Sure, thanks. It's not that easy to explain everything in 1 minute, but basically language modeling is of course like a very old idea going back to Claude Shannon in the middle of the previous century. And if we would say what is the objective function of language models is to basically predict the next word given the history. It may sound like an arbitrary choice, but in fact it can be shown that this is very related or pretty much the same as what is the objective in concepts like Kolmogorov complexity and minimum description length. So it's actually a very fundamental thing. And the large language models today are basically statistical language models that are trained on large amounts of data, like Wikipedia, internet text, where they actually try to extract patterns and again try to predict the next word as well as possible, given the history, which can be used in many applications that involve language, like sentences, like for example, machine translation, or if you want to summarize text, or if you want to improve, say, Google search, or classify emails, basically everything that contains some language text, you can use language models there. It's actually language independent, the current techniques, because they are completely data driven. So you can use it actually not just for languages, you can use language models to even compress general data, which also like is pretty much the state of the art in the data compression community.
Well, Tomas, that is great, but what do the letters GPT stand for, and why the number 3 in GPT-3? Little bit of history.
That's the name of the models developed by the OpenAI company. Of course, like there are many names for many language models. The technology is pretty much still the same, but each company, of course, wants to give these models some names. So GPT, I think it's a shortcut for general pre-trained model or something like that, which means again like that it's not like a task-specific model, but it's like a model that is a language model. So it actually is like trained again, like to predict the next word in general text, and then it can be fine-tuned for many other applications. So it's like a fundamental model that can be used for many tasks.
But yes, there are other models than GPT-3. Which are the others, and what does the landscape look like? Is anybody of you would like to take that? Ioannis or Ariel? Ariel, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a lot of models out there. Mainly, the biggest models are mainly from the US companies, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and so on. But there are also some initiatives in Europe. There is a German company called Aleph Alpha who is developing their own models. And us at AI Sweden, we're also training these large language models in the Nordic languages. But I really think Europe can improve on this.
So we talk about large language models, and we're going to get back to this issue of Europe and Europe's role in developing. But large, how large? What does it really mean?
So I mean, in NLP, in natural language processing, we have been working with all different kinds of sizes of models, but these GPT-3 and ChatGPT models are substantially bigger in terms of the required data and the compute and the memory that is needed to run them. So I mean, a couple of years ago, OpenAI just decided to let's see what happens when we scale this up. We just take a model that we have been working with for some time, and we add a lot of compute and data to it. So that was at the time, I think, really expensive, and it's still quite expensive to do that. I mean, we can be specific, but I don't know if it's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. But talking about large, I'm going to ask you, Fredrik, is it that important? Do all models need to be large? Are there very useful small models in AI?
I mean, of course, the size depends on what you want to use it for. So, I mean, what we see today is that we have this kind of general models that are trained on a very varied types of data. And of course, in order to cover the breadth, it seems like this size is a key component. And I mean, it's quite interesting to see that this exponential growth in the number of parameters of these models over the last 5 years. But we also know from these interesting studies on the scaling laws of large language models that you also need to scale the data size with the size of the model, which means that there's not much added value in having a really large model if you only have smaller amounts of data. So it means that if you want to build a model that only covers kind of a smaller data set, then a smaller model is sufficient and probably optimal given the amount of data.
Well, let's move from the models a bit and what we can use them for, applications on models. And I guess that brings us from GPT-3 to ChatGPT, doesn't it, Ioannis? What is the main difference between GPT-3 and ChatGPT?
Well, right now, the first difference is that there's been a major publicity campaign and everybody knows about ChatGPT, and it does a very nice job in the sense that it can provide good text, well-structured text, a little bit verbose maybe, but it's useful. It contains factual information. At times, it contains specialized information. For example, it can provide computer code. It can solve some mathematical questions, and they are all very useful in various domains, notably in education, for example.
Yeah, models can be used for many things. We see how various models are being used in music, imaging, computer code, chatbots, like and information gathering. So if I should ask, there's a question here, another question here from the audience. Will large language models revolutionize web search in the near future, within the next year or two? So I'm gonna ask around the panel here on that, and I'll hear what each of you are saying. So Ioannis, I'll start with you.
Well, certainly there's going to be a big impact. That's why Google is worried so much and they tried to enter into a counter offensive in this domain, but it didn't really work that well for them. In the past, what have we done? We've had a text query, and then we got a series of a linked list of search results, and then we had to enter into each of them and choose what's best for us. Now the paradigm has shifted, because when you have a text that very much summarizes what it is found, in my view, this paradigm shift is going to survive. So we're going to see maybe for a time being both the old ways to get results and the new ways to get results. And there are some problems still, in the sense that you don't know where each information provided by ChatGPT comes from, but in the future we may see citations, for example, and then things can start being even more serious.
Well, Tomas, what do you think? Will large language model revolutionize web search, or will it not?
Well, I'm sure that certainly there's the potential to revolutionize web search. In fact, I think that Google could have done this itself years ago. If you think of it, Google technology is still based on the same paradigm from like the 90s. It's based on this reverse index. You just basically type some query, and then you detect keywords, and then you return to the user like a list of web pages that contain these keywords. This is basically web search. But that's not exactly what users want. We of course adapted to how Google works. We know how to write the queries so that we get the results, but there are still like many queries that we wouldn't really use Google search very efficiently for. And if you think of it, a more natural way how to actually get what we want would be actually to ask the computer for some specific question that can be actually long or like complicated, and then expect that it provides the answer. This was not doable with this technology that is based on keyword search, again, which is from the 90s. But with neural language models, this is actually perfectly doable. So, the technology that again is here for like at least 10 years allows like new generation of web search. In fact, I was talking about this already like when I was in Google Brain 2012 to 2014, and I must say that Google is full of like very, very smart people, but the company itself is at the same time like very slow and very incremental, very protective of its core product, which is search, and you can't actually disrupt Google from inside of Google. So I think that what OpenAI is doing now, and Microsoft, is they are trying to disrupt the dominance of Google search, and that can actually reflect in better version of Google search, which people at Google are totally capable of delivering, but they just didn't have any external motivation to do so. So I think that now that it's becoming more obvious than a couple of years ago, I think that we can expect that people will start moving much faster, and it's certainly totally doable in my view to redo search in a way that, as it was what I said, you can get summarization of the results. You don't need to just provide links to existing websites that contain the keywords, but you can create original content for each query that can be even personalized for each user, so that users find the information they are looking for in a much more dense, compact way, much faster and much more easy than with the technology from the 90s.
So my old mother, Beata, she's 87 and she has an iPad and she's but she's struggling with writing, Google queries and understanding the links coming back and figuring out what to make of it. So you put a voice recognition system on top and a language generator at the end, and then she can sit and talk with the internet and say, so tell me about the opera in Oslo. When was it built? And then they will have a conversation. They can sit and talk all day. Is this a democratization of knowledge, or is it not, Ariel?
I think it's both potentially. It depends on if we have. So it's definitely a technology that makes certain aspects easier to access. But also, if we only have one big company doing this, then it's or some few big companies doing this, then it's not necessarily a democratization in the sense. I really believe in the technology, though. It will enable a lot of use cases. You will be able to argue with your toaster. It's going to be great.
Oh, that would be an interesting conversation, I'm sure. But Fredrik, I asked if it's a democratization of the internet in a sense of knowledge, but isn't ChatGPT, for you using that as an example? No, I'm going to use some bad words here, but isn't that just a big bullshit generator? Because we humans have filled the world with bullshit, and we fill the internet with bullshit. And these models are the input is from the internet, so it's full of bullshit. So, and I'll just mention an interesting part here. Here in Norway, we've the libraries at the universities have reported that they are getting a lot of requests for books that don't exist because the students is getting help from ChatGPT to writing their theses, and then they're looking for the books that are just created by ChatGPT. Is this a hopeless bullshit generator, and can we get out of it? What do you say, Fredrik? It was a long, windy question, but what do you say?
I mean, isn't it like us in that sense? We are also
we are full of bullshit.
I would say the following. I mean, I do think. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, it's equally kind of sure about the things that are utter nonsense, and equally sure about the things that actually makes perfect sense.
Sounds like a politician to me.
But I really think that the aspect here. The aspect here is more about it requires this human verification of the content, and I think that's makes it very interesting that as of now we cannot take the output directly, but it's absolutely necessary to have some form of filter verification, approval of the output before it can be consumed as some verified information. And of course, this puts a lot of challenges when it comes to building applications on top of this. But I think as long as you interact directly with the system and that you're aware that this is the fact, you as a human can value and judge the information that you get and then see, does this make sense? Yes or no? So maybe it's more kind of problematic or at least challenging when you have this kind of conversation, as you said, as your example with your mother there, that if you have a person who has a direct conversation with this tool without knowing that, oh, this is actually a tool that could generate incorrect information compared to that's a verified source. And if to tie this back to the previous question, it seems to me that there's two separate use cases. I do think the search use case is different, because there you want to see what are the sources where I could find information. And then you judge which one do you want to follow and so on. I think that, of course, having this as a question answering system, that I don't really care the source, I just want to know the answer, which is the case sometimes. Like you said, example with when was the opera in Oslo built? Well, that's just a factual question, you just need to know the answer. So I think there would be two different use cases, but I definitely think that the use of this chat GPT or language generators will have a profound effect, because basically most of the human society is text-based, which means that now you can influence most of human society through this.
Yes, and there is an enormous amount of number of people in the world that have access to the internet through telephones, never has so much information been available to so many, and never have so many people used their time watching cat videos. So that's interesting. It is.
Morten, I would say a few things on this.
Yes, Ioannis.
Yeah, okay. When the internet started, we were all very hopeful about it being used in a democratic way, but it did not turn out exactly the way we hoped for. Maybe this is the case now. And before going further, I would like to say that there is an urgent need to have some regulatory measures on the use of these machines. First of all, when people converse with these machines, they should know that they converse with a machine rather than with a human. To me, this is very important. This should be subject to regulation, because if this does not happen, then many negative effects can take place. For example, people conversing with such machines, they should have a certain knowledge and a certain intelligence to understand what's fake and what's not fake. And this is not always easy. Even if such machines have some internal checks and balances, there's always the case that they produce wrong outputs, and then they can misinform. So we really need a better educated people to handle these machines. That's thing number one. And thing number two is that if an average person converses with these machines, then because these machines have many can provide many facts about many different things, they create an aura of being intelligent. Maybe they're not intelligent, okay, but the average person has a perception that they are intelligent, and then people start feeling being threatened. And this can create a society of people that fear new technologies. They feel that they cannot compete with machines, and this is a very dangerous path to follow.
I think that brings us over to, there is a question we have gotten in here. What are your recommended regulations and safeguards within companies experimenting with ChatGPT at all? But we can generalize that to recommended regulations and safeguards. How should the society respond? And I think you pointed to it. You need to know that you're talking with a computer, a machine. That's one. Are there others?
That's thing number one.
Yeah. Ariel, any others?
So I'm a bit of a reactionary here, or extremist, but I'm really afraid that we are legislating instead of doing in Europe, right? So it's easy for us to say, okay, so someone else is doing this scary stuff. Let's at least box it in. And then, if it has a big monetary value, we will use it anyway, but we can't make it in Europe. So I think we should be I agree with Ioannis that we should have certain safeguards, but maybe not be too conservative either, because we risk on missing out. But there are many views on this.
Fredrik, you have a view on that?
I think it's important to be aware that, I mean, this technology can be used for many different applications, and I think it makes a huge difference if this is if you, for example, using ChatGPT to generate medical advice compared to say, oh, I need an introduction to my web page that I can plug in there. Where, of course, if you're using it for medical advice, then the standard regulatory framework for medical advice, of course, should apply. But if you're just using it to generate some text for your web page, of course, it shouldn't be under strict regulation for that. So, and I think this is one of those challenging things when it comes to regulation, that normally we don't want regulation to regulate technology, but rather you want to regulate the use or the behavior that you want to avoid misuse of different types. And that, of course, we want to do in this case as well. So therefore, I would rather focus on the kind of application or usages rather than on the technology or the systems themselves.
Tomas, on the regulations, do we the Americans they say let's see what actually the Americans say something like this: we cannot foresee everything that might happen, so trying to regulate it might be hindering innovation. Let's see what's happening and then regulate if things go bad. Well, in Europe we do have a tendency to say let's regulate it so nothing will go bad. So what do you think about that? Was this an unfair comparison between Europe and US?
Well, I think that there's many things to discuss in this context, but some are basically having higher priority than the others, and I think that so that's something that maybe we should figure out first. I would have maybe some example, because you can say that these large language models are basically a novel technology, but we've been as a humanity developing new technology, for instance, like very rapidly since the beginning of this industrial revolution. So I would have an example, say with cars. Imagine that people just did develop the first cars, and now should we at first discuss how to regulate the cars, like how to make the rules so that they don't run over people and everything is safe? Of course, this is important, but is it the very first question, or is the very first question how to actually build cars and how to make the industry to happen, how to actually create this technological sector? I think that in Europe the discussion is it's not wrong, but it's kind of like the other way around. We are trying to regulate something that we don't own, we don't control. Maybe we can set some rules, but you know, like how it's gonna work with Google or Microsoft or these companies, they're like monopolies in their areas. If they develop products that the users actually want, they will just do whatever they want, and we will have to kind of like live with it, because we can't actually really control what they are doing. Try to regulate Google search these days. It's not easy at all, and after you start with all this regulation stuff, you limit potential for like other companies to be created in this area. So actually the monopolies even like the regulations in the end, because it's just very hard to enter the market after you set very complex rules. So I think that I'm not really against regulations in the longer term, but the first thing that we should be discussing, in my view, is very simple, and that's where's the money? If you look at the big tech sector now, like it has been very big part of the US economy. It drive the growth of the stock markets over the last 15 years. And in Europe, we don't have anything like that. Like, let's just try to make a list of like 20 big companies that are using machine learning, AI, or basically internet. You will just make a list of basically US companies. There will be also Chinese companies, which is actually interesting case, because many of these now monopolistic companies did start in the US, but China, through like their ways, did manage to kind of like face this danger. that they will lose their market, their data, their money, their people. But Europe didn't actually react in any sensible way, at least from my point of view, because I was working in the US for many years, then I returned to Europe. So I have some comparison. Of course, like I just have one point of view, so there are other people with different views. But from my perspective, Europe is not being smart, because instead of like discussing first the important things, we are spending too much time on discussing secondary things like how to regulate AI and how to make gender balance somewhere in these companies or whatever, research grants, ethical AI, and so on. I think we have tons of these secondary questions and domains that are being discussed all over. But for me, the very first question is like, how comes we don't have big tech industry in Europe and nothing is changing over the years? So we are not creating any situation that would make this better, and still our market in this area is dominated by companies that are basically monopolies, and they are not even paying taxes in Europe. So actually any local competition that would start here is actually in a worse position than foreign companies. So why don't we discuss this question much more than the regulations, because the regulations are basically secondary. We can't regulate something that we don't own, we don't control, we don't have here.
So Tomas, that lead me over to the question of the policies and politics and Europe's interest. And I think that's an interesting thing to touch upon. Fredrik, are there any European large language models that have any size to talk about, or are we playing with smaller things? European companies developing LLMs, large language models, or why don't we? Are we investing enough, Fredrik? Let me put it that way. And if we don't, should we? And if we should, how?
I mean, there was many questions in one. So if I would say, I would concur with Tomas in the sense that I think if Europe wants to lead in regulation, we also have to lead in innovation. So I think we should invest at least as much in innovation as we are investing in regulation. And if we do both at the same time, then I think we can have a very positive impact. But if we only invest in regulation and then just hope that innovation will solve itself, then I think that can be a dangerous path forward. When it comes to Europe and the large language models here, yes, we do have sizable, well, at least there are several projects that is working towards developing this large language model. We have Ariel and AI Sweden that is developing one of them. We have OpenGPTX in Germany. We have the Netherlands have a project. Finland has FinGPT, and there are a number of others. So there are several initiatives going on. But I think that also kind of highlights the challenges with Europe, that we have a tendency to have many internally competing, moderately sized initiatives. So instead of having a small number of really large companies or other organizations that really invest heavily in this, we have a tendency to more fragment the field and to have many parallel initiatives, which of course is good in the sense that we can explore multiple different paths, but it also means that there is a challenge when scale becomes a major factor, which it currently is. And to me, that is one of the major differences here, is that it's not really about competence, it's more about scale. And the question is Europe willing to invest at the scale necessary? And I think it's quite interesting to look at the investments made in, for example, OpenAI, where they started out with $1 billion. That was like the starting seed funding. And now Microsoft was, I don't remember, was it 10 or 15 million? It's like huge numbers that they invest in a single company developing this technology. And I think that is at the scale that we need to invest if we want to be able to achieve results that are comparable to them.
Well, I'll just follow up on that. So do we need to put our efforts together in Europe in order to achieve that?
I think that would be beneficial to consolidate and to bring together expertise and computing resources and so on, so that we can actually try to reach the level of, but it's not only about scale, I think it's also speed. And maybe speed is a bigger aspect here, because if you have multiple different organizations that need to agree, of course there is an overhead in agreeing. While if you're a single company with a single vision, you can act much quicker. And especially in this area where we see rapid development, if you need to first agree upon multiple parties before you can act, that will significantly slow down the speed. So maybe actually the speed is more crucial here than only the size, because the size might be easier to share.
Ioannis, what are your thoughts on this? Do we run too slow? Do we collaborate too little? Does it matter whether we are not doing this or not?
Well, you see here, we see all the deficiencies of the European model of doing research. We have collaborative projects that are fairly small. We produce too many deliverables, and companies don't produce products. So European Union was aware of these deficiencies for some time now, but I don't see any change, unfortunately. And now this is very evident in the case of large language models, because we don't have neither the scale nor the speed that is needed to address these issues. That's why the European AI landscape is small and fragmented compared to the US, and now it's small and fragmented compared to China as well.
So, but I'm gonna. Sometimes silly questions need to be asked, and this might be one. Ariel, is it important, or can Europe continue selling luxury goods to Asia, etc., etc.? What do you think about that? I think I know what you're going to say, but let me hear it.
Well, one thing is that we don't fully know, but I see one potential trajectory is that these language models and the multimodal models will be extremely impactful and will be everywhere in some form. And then they will have a big cultural impact as well. We will interact with them and they will form us the way internet has formed us. So if we want to be part of that journey and also be part of the economic developments, I think it's important. Yeah.
I have some more questions. I have an input list from the audience, and we will get through as many as we can. We're going to just bring one more issue on the table in this and what we're discussing right now, and that is public versus commercial interests. Now, should substantial AI models and large language models like that, should that be a public good in some way, or should we leave it all to commercial interests? And who would like to answer that? Would you like to say something about that, Tomas? Ioannis, who would like to just start talking? One of you. Okay, Tomas, you start, and then I go over to Ioannis.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can say something very smart here, because, well, I think that it's a question whether we are following the path of the US, which is mostly like this commercial AI, where actually the applications are driving many of the innovations, and basically the thing that makes money is the one that gets the investment. And I think China is in many ways quite similar to this, or whether we want to be more like in this kind of like planned economy stage, where we would actually like gather together like as experts and plan like what should we do so that the impact on the society is a positive one. I think that that has the dangers that we may actually be missing out the crucial things. you know, like if we would gather like some 12 years ago, I remember the time where language modeling community was pretty much dead, and everybody would just agree on like, no, there's no reason to invest in the language modeling research because there's not going to be anything new ever invented, because really like 12 years ago, people will tell you engrams are here forever and you just need engram techniques. So that was before the neural networks. You know, so I think that it's a danger that if you have like a bunch of experts who are like working for many years on some concepts, they may be kind of like having this tunnel vision, and they may be missing on many things that for them are just like annoying, or like they don't really care about it. So maybe this free market style is, in my view, may be better. So like some connection between the industry and the society, where it's kind of like a growing organically, like you know, like in Silicon Valley, well, where actually the demand is driven many times by the companies, and companies are giving people what people actually are using, and that's the metric, basically, again, the money. Maybe that's actually better than trying to like spend too much time trying to predict what will be the impact on the society with this or that technology, because if we just keep talking about it, somebody else will do it and sell it to us, and then we'll be again locked in this local optima where we are just buying things that maybe were invented here, but we will not be part of the commercial success, and we will not be able even to control it. So so that's my take on it.
So Ioannis or Fredrik?
Yeah, sure. I would like to say a few words on this.
Yeah.
You know, your question has been answered many years ago, because we live in a capitalist world, okay? You can call it free market or whatever. And in this world, it was big companies that pioneered, US big companies, for example, and they made very, very good profit out of it. So most probably we're going to continue this path in the future, because one plus for them is their size. They have enough resources, human resources and other resources to invest and produce new products. That said, though, there should be some checks and balances for them. For example, right now, I don't really feel that I know enough about ChatGPT. I would like to know more. So they should be somehow forced to release some of the know-how for a benefit. For example, they can have tax cuts, or I don't know what they could have, but they should release part of their know-how for the benefit of the society and the benefit of science on one hand, and on the other hand, we should know more about what data they use to produce whatever they produce. For example, if my books have been used in training these models, then maybe I could get a penny. And nobody really talks about this anymore. So we could find ways that are benefit both for companies and for the society. And if we find this balance, then we can live in a better future.
So Fredrik, short on the same topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think one challenge here is, of course, risk taking. So I mean, I think that is in some sense, I mean, why are this being developed in a more commercial setting? Because they are willing to take the risk. But I think we probably can relatively, I mean, within a foreseeable future, we'll reach a level where the kind of technology will be more mature. And then it becomes more a question of, can you find the business models for actually maintaining and servicing these kind of models? And maybe it is the case that there could be an opportunity for more public organizations to say that, well, we don't need to pay all the investment cost in developing this. Now, with a relatively modest cost, we can build our own model. And of course, usually the public sector have a lot of textual data available to them. And I mean, it's a very textually driven domain. And then that could be an opportunity to actually provide more open models that could then be used in a broader context where it's not based on a commercial contract and so on. It's more, well, we provide this for a public good, and maybe there is a sharing that the organizations that use this need to feedback data and so on into the system. And then by pooling our data resources, we can together create an open and better model, just like we have Wikipedia and OpenStreetMap and so on. In that same sense, I think would be a very beneficial way forward.
Thank you. We're going to move over to the question of what's happening to us as humans when we have these tools that are big. You know, what we have today is one thing. It impresses us a lot. Now, fast forward 10 years, and we can assume that there have been at least some linear development that are interesting, maybe even more revolutionary ones. So we have a question here. What is your opinion that ChatGPT is hindering the capability of creative thinking in young school kids? Because solutions can be directly generated, so why put the effort in? So there is this concrete question, this more general one. What does it do to us? And I'll go to Ariel first.
Sure. So I think I'm positive towards these models, and I think they provide a great value to investigate whether, I mean, in the specific case with ChatGPT, let's the model generate the answer and then let the student verify why it's a bad or a good answer. There are so many angles with this technology that we shouldn't be afraid, but we should use it in the correct way.
Fredrik?
Yes, I mean, I honestly don't really see the connection there. Why would a tool like this reduce the creativity? To me, it seems like, maybe at least from a personal perspective, I mean, it seems like the slowness is something that hinders creativity. And the faster you can get results, the more creative you could be, which means that if I have an idea, instead of that, I have to spend half an hour writing long or make, I don't know, drawings or whatever. Now I can just come up with the idea and very quickly get, can you draw a diagram of this, or can you write a description of this? And then you can move on, and then you can iterate much faster. So it seems to me that this should not prevent, but rather accelerate creativity.
Right, but Ioannis, do you think there will be some types of jobs that will disappear in design or in, you know, whatnot?
Well, in a sense, I think that we live in revolutionary times with respect to education in the following sense. You remember in the past when you went in your primary school, you learned how to add two numbers and how to multiply two numbers. I don't even think that our education system has replied yet what type of mathematical education we need. Are the pupils going to learn how to add numbers, multiply numbers? So we didn't even reply exactly to this question. Now we have a new tool that can produce text that is persuasive, and certainly it has, in my view, creative capabilities. How we're going to absorb this new tool into the education system, to me, it's a big question mark. It's not an easy question to answer, because it's like having, you know, in the past we had those wet pens and then we had other pens. Now we have a creative pen, new creative pen, and we don't know how to use it. So essentially, we need an overhaul, in my view, of the entire education system, not only at the university level, but primarily in the lower levels, on how we can use these tools to our benefit. It's not clear to me yet.
So, Fredrik, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question regarding education. And actually, I think this analogy to calculators is probably not too far away, because in some sense, this calculator allows us to solve complicated mathematical problems with limited mental effort. And now we have a tool that can generate text with similar minimal mental effort. But I actually think that there's still a great value in being relatively quick in adding and multiplying numbers, for the simple reason it's just too slow. I mean, if you have to pull out your calculator and do everything, it would just take forever. You could not solve more complex problems. So it means that in order to be able to solve more complex problems, this is a stepping stone. And I think it will be the same also with text, that yes, we need to be able to generate our own text, even though maybe in many, I would say, everyday usages, we will use tools like this, but we are still able to do it reasonably well, because in some context that will be faster. So, but then after saying that, I also agree with Ioannis that I think there is our educational system is not designed for today, but it's designed for our previous society, or I mean the more industrial ages, and that there is significant pressure on the educational system to adapt.
So I have a question that each of you should just answer yes or no to. I have two such questions. I know it's very hard for all of us to answer only yes or no, but that's the rule of the game now. If you're enjoying a piano piece, listening to Spotify or whatnot, does it matter to you if it was originally composed by a computer? Ariel?
No.
Tomas?
No.
Ioannis?
No.
Fredrik?
No, and you probably couldn't know the difference.
That was not, but anyway, it was. So the next yes or no question is, Elon Musk said on Twitter that ChatGPT is scary good. We are not far from dangerously strong AI. Is he right, or has he smoked something he shouldn't? Is he right, Ariel?
I don't think so, no.
Tomas?
No.
Ioannis?
No, I think he's wrong.
Fredrik?
No.
So he smoked something he shouldn't, in other words.
Okay.
Okay.
No, we didn't make that. That's your conclusion.
But
I mean,
no,
I think the problem here is that, I mean, these kind of models, they're quite limited in what they can do. I mean, as Thomas said, basically they are predicting what is the next token in the sequence.
Yes.
And it's quite far away. I mean, I think probably it's probably closer to the way that we actually work than we would like to confess. But
Yes.
I think that in at least this kind of, what's a prototypical example of intelligent behavior, more analytical thinking and so on, I think it's actually still have far ways to go. And actually, it's not even clear that this particular technology is on the path towards that. And I think that's a much more interesting question, and a much, at least in my mind, much less clear whether it is on the path towards being able to solve it.
Right, so let's do that.
I think
Is it on the path? Yes or no, Fredrik?
I would say probably not. So I say no then.
Tomas?
Oh, no, and I can just quickly add that I did write some papers about this, discussing it a lot, like in 2015.
That's great. Ariel?
I'm gonna be more positive and say maybe.
Ioannis?
I do not hear your question. Sorry about this.
Yeah, are we on a path to artificial general intelligence through this technology?
I cannot reply with yes or no. I have my views on this. I can. It's a very interesting question, but it's not a yes or no reply.
Okay, that's good. And we have a question from the audience. This will be the last one. And the question is, shouldn't we be concerned about the current tendency of ChatGPT and similar systems to produce misinformation, in particular in the context of web search, which is which is intended to produce trusted, verifiable, true information. So obviously we need to deal with that technology, those tools differently. How do we manage? How should we be concerned about use ChatGPT and similar systems to produce misinformation? How do we deal with it? Very short, because we only have a few minutes. Do you have anything short you can say, Fredrik, about this?
I say yes, of course, this is super important. I would say that it's a lot of work being put into doing that. But I think the fundamental question is, it's not always clear what is true and what is false information. So I think there is always a danger in being too, draconic on this. And actually, I think that's also important, that it has to reside with us to determine whether we want to trust this or not. And therefore, I think what's very important is to not hide these kind of tools behind a lot of layers of other things. And that, I think, can be dangerous. because then you believe now it comes from this trusted source when in fact it comes from a less trusted source. So we need this verifying the path of information.
Ioannis?
Besides, having machines that have internal checks and balances on misinformation, I would put much more effort into educating people and having educated citizens that can make the difference, that
Thank
can
you.
tell the difference.
Ariel?
Yeah, I wanted to say the same thing. So I really think it's within these tools to say everything, but the people who use them needs to know that. So it's really about general education.
Tomas?
Well, I think that this is like an old problem that appears again and again, and people had to learn that at Wikipedia there can be wrong information, that Google search can give you links to documents that contain misinformation. There can be pictures that were like manipulated in Photoshop, so they are showing something that never happened. And now we will basically see a lot of plausibly looking text that will contain, again, wrong information. So society will have to adapt to this, and I think we will.
So Tomas, what you were saying was actually there's not that much new under the sun with respect to this. We have seen the same conversations before, and we see them outside of the realm of the digital. Who and how can we trust? And trust is a core pillar in a well-functioning society. So we are not bringing it into the discussion of ChatGPT is interesting. It's focusing the discussion or the topic in a sense, but it is much broader. So I would like to thank you so much. Thank you to all of you, to Ioannis, Ariel, Tomas, and Fredrik. Thank you to Alexa or Anna and everybody behind the scenes who made sure this was running well. Sorry, I got it. Sorry for not being able to get to all of the questions that came in. Thank you so much to all of you that was listening and watching and following this, and for the questions you feel that was great. Make sure to check out the playlists of past CLIAIR AQuA events on CLIAIR's YouTube channel, and let us know if your organization or institution is interested in helping us organizing future AQuAs on other topics in the future. We are here to do that. Also, thank you so much again, and see you in the CLIAIR All Questions Answered panels and events in the future. And Ioannis, you had an announcement to make.
Yes, since large language models are such an important technology, AIDA organizes an AI Excellence lecture by Professor at the University of Pisa on the 15th of March on more technical issues related to the large language model. So the ones of the audience that want to know more about this technology, they're welcome to join.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and have a nice evening, afternoon. Good dinner, everybody. Take good care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.